Happy Arvo. Hello. Thank you so much for joining me today. How you guys doing? I'm going to react to the 10 lies Americans are told about Australia. Ooh, fun. I mean, I know you guys ride kangaroos to school. I know that's true. That's not a lie. So I don't know what these 10 lies are going to be. Be interesting to see. It's from this channel, Kinda Australian. I've reacted to her once before, I believe. Great videos. Go check her out. Kinda Australian. Link down below. Let's see how I've been lied to.
G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Caitlin and I'm an American living in beautiful Sydney, Australia. Before moving over to Australia,
And I may skip through a little bit if you want. Definitely go check out the entire video down below. Let's do it.
there are definitely some myths about Australia that as an American I believe were true. And there are some flat out lies that I've been told by Aussies and just lies that Americans actually believe about Australia. Now some of these are just Aussies having
You didn't fall for the drop bear, did you?
a little bit of fun and poking a bit of fun at Americans who really don't know anything about Australia. And some of this is definitely
Did you fall for it?
from the media, from cartoons that we've seen. Here are 10 lies that Americans have been told about Australia.
Okay.
So grab a bicky, grab a cuppa, and let's jump right into this video. So we're just gonna get the first one, the most obvious one out of the way, and
Is it kind? I was going to say it's kinda. Okay. This threw me off. I was like, wait, is her name Kind Australian? Like a nice Australian? She's kinda Australian. See, the heart is kind of like an A. Kinda.
Australia is trying to get the first one, the most obvious one out of the way, and that is that everything in Australia is trying to kill you. I have to say, as an American who's lived in Sydney for over a year now, I can say for certain that I have come across one deadly animal the entire time I've been here.
How do you know? How do you know? How do you know how many deadly spiders were not in your shoes that you didn't even know about? Huh? On a daily basis. What about snakes in your ceiling? Huh? Because I've seen tons of snakes in people's ceilings in Australia. For some reason, that's a problem. How do you know there weren't deadly ones in your ceiling? No, I'm just kidding. Thinking about, before I started learning about Australia, I definitely had that kind of misconception that it was like a really dangerous place, but a really cool place. It wasn't like a bad thing. It's like, that's a really badass place. And it's true. It's true. I mean, to be honest, it's true. It's just, y'all aren't all, out there in the outback fighting animals all day. It's just some of you.
And even then, it's not really that deadly to adults, and that is a redback spider over here. Well, it doesn't mean that Australia isn't
It's not even that deadly. That's a very Australian thing of you to say.
home to some deadly snakes and some venomous spiders and sharks and jellyfish and crocs. But overall, this isn't something that the
She's definitely becoming more Australian, huh? It's not even that deadly.
average everyday Aussie is going to run into over here. No one's fighting a croc on their way to school or running from a brown snake on their way to work.
While they are riding a kangaroo, they're not fighting a crocodile.
You're probably not going to find a funnel web spider hiding in a woolly somewhere ready to bite you. So Americans have this overblown concept that you're constantly going to be running into deadly and dangerous animals over in Australia.
Probably more so than in America, though. Unless you're like in the mountains with a bear. Apart from that, I don't know. Kangaroos can disembowel you. Don't forget that.
If you're like me,
You guys have warned me many times.
and you live in a pretty populated area, pretty close to a city, which the vast majority of Aussies do, you're probably not going to be running into deadly snakes and spiders on a regular basis. Will you see them? Most likely, yeah, especially if you're somebody who wants to get out and travel a little bit.
Will you see deadly animals? Most likely, yeah. But they're not everywhere. It's not every hour of every day.
Go on bushwalks, check out the beaches and whatnot. You might eventually run into a shark or a snake, or if you decide to go
Oh, no big deal. Just a shark.
up to Darwin, be careful because there are crocs pretty much everywhere near
Okay, so Darwin, it's true. She just said it.
water up there. But just because there are deadly animals here in Australia, it doesn't mean you will run into them all the time. And to be honest, most Aussies aren't really too concerned about running into a deadly
That's because you guys are badass.
snake or
I've seen it. The women, you know, they get up in the light fixtures and grab the snake by its head.
spider in everyday life. The next myth is that it is so expensive to live in Australia. Now,
I feel like that is stupid people looking at the prices and not doing the conversion to USD. That's part of the problem.
if you're going to look at Australia and every single other country in the world, yeah, Australia is pretty expensive, but compared to America and compared to the average 10-year cost that you would spend living 10 years in the States compared to 10 years in Australia, it's actually a little bit cheaper to live in Australia than it
That blows my mind. And actually, I think a couple of weeks ago I reacted to a video of a guy that like broke it down, you know, the cost. And it was crazy. It really was cheaper to live in Australia without like health insurance and all this other crap that you have to pay out the wazoo for here in America.
is in the States. Even though Aussies do have to pay a Medicare levy, or even if you choose to get private health insurance, it's so much cheaper and it covers so much more. If you get sick within the 10-year period in the States, you're going to have to pay quite a hefty bill for the vast majority of Americans. On top of that,
Yeah, that's the biggest scam about America.
health insurance in general
It's just a big game of Russian roulette. Hope you don't get cancer.
costs more, plus you have deductibles that you have to pay. And besides that, food costs more. I just did a video recently on the grocery costs, and it's actually more for groceries over in the States than it is
Really?
here in Australia.
I would not have expected
A
that.
lot of people in my comments have pointed out that part of the reason this myth exists is because a lot of Americans come over to Australia and they just go to the touristy section. So of course, restaurants are going to cost more. The grocery stores in the CBD areas are going to cost more. If you're doing touristy things, it's just naturally going to be more expensive because they
And also wages are higher in Australia, like at the low end, you know, like your minimum wage is way higher. I know that. So even if some things cost more, you're making a higher wage.
know that you'll pay for it because of the area that you're staying in. And more than likely, if you're visiting Australia, it's probably a once-in-a-lifetime trip for a lot of Americans. So there's this perceived notion that it's so much more expensive to live in Australia, but really it's actually a little bit cheaper. So I'll be frank, you guys, I've had
That's
mostly women over in America ask this or point this out, and that's the notion that Aussies, particularly a lot of Aussie men, are either the typical surfer bro types, the whole blonde hair, blue eye, beach body types, or they're basically Mick Dundee, Crocodile Dundee. That's
It turns out, hold on. It turns out that half of Australia dudes look like this. They're called eshays. This is, I mean, I don't know. You know what I mean? It turns out you're either Crocodile Dundee, or you're an eshay, or you're a bogan. From what I've learned.
definitely the stereotype, and I know so many Aussies who are nothing like that at all. I recently married an Aussie who is nothing like that at all. At the end of the day, Aussies are just as varied and culturally different as Americans. Australia is a huge culturally diverse
You know, that's probably true, but America does have a weirdly like wide spectrum of, and I'm talking about like you take someone from Boston and someone from Alabama, they're like very different on average. Very different. And America's I feel like America's maybe not unique in that way, but it's a pretty big spectrum over here in America.
diverse country. And there are people with different backgrounds, different religions, different races, and people grew up in different types of homes and different environments. You're going to find the good, you're going to find the bad, you're going to find a ton of people in between as well. So no, not all Aussies are the blonde hair, blue eye surfer types, and not all of them are basically little versions of
I
Crocodile.
feel like the women who say that like are hoping the answer is yes, they are. That's what they want. They want the blonde hair, blue eyed surfer dude.
Australians drink Foster's beer.
Wait, what? Australians don't drink Foster's beer?
Because the slogan commercials, and that is Australians drink Foster's beer. Because the slogan is Foster's, Australian for beer, and that's really the only sort of Aussie beer that Americans ever hear about or know
About
about.
VB.
When it comes to spirits and breweries and distilleries, typically a lot of Americans don't really know that much about Australian
You tell me you guys don't actually drink Foster's?
alcohol. I mean,
I
I
don't
have a
believe
bottle
it.
up here of Yellowtail, and there's only 3 major types of wines that you can get at pretty much any wine and spirit store over in the States. And I call them wine and spirit stores because that's what they were called in Pennsylvania, where I was from. But you basically just get Yellowtail, 19 Crimes, and Fisheye. You're not going to get a huge variety of Australian alcohol, and that includes beer and wine as well. So a lot of
I need to go pick some of those up.
Americans think that Aussies drink Foster's, and ironically, even though Foster's was invented in Melbourne, it was actually invented by 2 Irish American brothers who came over. So technically it's a beer that's made by Americans, even though it was made in Australia. But if you're coming to Australia,
Are they Americans if they live in Australia? I don't know. You tell me. Because I feel like half of the stuff that was invented in America. I mean, America's a pretty young country, so it's like half those people were immigrants, first generation.
don't go to a pub and ask for a Foster's. If you're not sure, hell, ask the bartender. They can probably give you some great recommendations as to what to drink. But please don't waste your money. Don't waste your time on Foster's beer here. If you really want to try some classic beer,
She does not like Foster's beer. I would have to. I gotta try Foster's beer, and I gotta try VB.
beers, and I'm talking like old school beers, go for a VB, go for a 4X's or a 2E's. I've even heard Cascade is really, really good. There are so many other beers you can have besides Foster's. Number 5 is that
You gotta try the Foster's.
Outback Steakhouse is basically Aussie food. It's not whatsoever.
Okay, who thinks that? The weird thing about Outback Steakhouse is, apart from the name and like a little bit of decor, mostly, it doesn't even feel Australian at all. Like the food doesn't even seem Australian.
Do Aussies love steak and barbecues? Yes, absolutely. I know so many Aussies who love steak, who love meat, who love to barbecue, who love to grill, as we also call it over in
If you guys are not aware, that's a steakhouse over here, mainly I think in America. Yeah, it's just a normal steakhouse. It's pretty good.
the States. But to be honest, things like the bloomin' onion really isn't a super traditional, popular dish over here in
I don't know why they don't add some dishes to the menu that are, serve me some fairy bread.
Australia. You're not going to find meat pies on any Outback Steakhouse menu, but that's one of the most iconic and classic Aussie foods without it being a brand of food like Shapes or Vegemite or Tim Tams. They might have like brownie sundaes and cheesecake, that generic sort of American dessert stuff on their menu, but a lot of Aussies over here, when it comes to desserts, they think of things like pavlova and rum balls if it's Christmas, and Christmas puddings and whatnot. That's more the traditional Aussie dessert than you will really find in any
I wish they would add that to the menu or make a new restaurant that has this stuff, I don't want to eat some fake Australian cuisine. I want the real stuff.
Outback Steakhouse menu. So no, Outback Steakhouse is not Aussie cuisine whatsoever. In fact, Outback Steakhouse was founded in Florida. It's very, very gimmicky, and to be honest, really has nothing to do with Australia other than the fact that they have steak on their menu. Number 6 is that Aussies
Steak on the menu. I never thought of that as being an Australian thing.
live in the Outback. The vast
That's definitely something I thought growing up. That's an interesting one because I really thought that. I didn't know most of y'all almost all of you guys live on the coast. Makes sense. Way more beautiful in general. I mean, I don't live on the coast, so I feel you guys living on the inland. Although the inland of Australia is cool too. It's the outback, you know what I mean? That's where you do find the deadly animals. So, yeah, I had that misconception that everybody was like in the sticks, roughing it out there in Australia.
vast majority
Not like it was like third world country or something, but just that it was very outdoorsy. Like everyone is like Crocodile Dundee.
of Aussies actually live along the coast. Over 90% of Australians' land is considered uninhabitable, and the vast majority of that land is considered the outback. The outback is dry and barren and inhospitable. It's not a place where you can grow food. Water is pretty scarce. So over 85% of Australia's population lives along the coast. And
Shout out to anyone living out there in the outback.
typically that's within a 1 to 2 hour drive of a beach, of a huge body of water. You're really not going to find that many Aussies that live in the outback. You might find a couple towns. I think the biggest town that's like within the outback area is probably Alice Springs. But
I wonder what you consider like an outback town, because I know, because I've done those videos where I try to find a house in Australia, which for some reason I find entertaining. And I've looked at some houses out there, you know, more in the central part of Australia. That's where you can get a decent deal. And yeah, there's lots of little towns
all
out there.
year round in Australia.
It's hot all year round. I definitely thought that. I still kind of think that. I mean, I know now. I know it gets kind of chilly, and in some places you'll even get some snow. But overall, it's not like here in Indiana it gets to like really uncomfortably cold where you don't want to go outside. I don't think it gets like that in the majority of Australia.
And I was guilty of this. I really did believe that Australia was a typically constantly hot, humid climate. But
Maybe I'm wrong about that still.
Australia is actually the same size as the mainland US, and you
Yeah.
have to remember just how varied the climate is in the States. It's
Yeah,
really
that's
varied over here as well. You'll find snow, you'll find hail, you'll find rainy places, you'll find dry places.
I get that, but I still feel, I assume on average, obviously, on average, it's warmer. I don't think that's a contentious statement. It's warmer on average. You're not going to get like 6 inches of snow anywhere other than in a mountain, right? Right? Surely I'm right.
You'll find mountains, you'll find beaches, you'll find desert, you'll find rainforest. There is a huge array of climates over here. It's not always going to be hot and sunny, and for my Americans, about 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit on a regular basis. Yes, the summers can get extremely hot in some places. If you're in Darwin or Perth, you're probably used to those 40 to 50 degree days when there's a huge heat wave in those areas.
I guess Darwin is way hotter, isn't it? It's much closer to the equator, right? Like compared to something like Melbourne or Sydney. Must get way hotter. Actually, oh, Charles. Darwin weather. Let's see, right now, 68 degrees. That is a beautiful day. But it's getting up to 88. Oh, it's like in the middle of the night right now. 90, 90, 90, 90. That is hot, folks. That is really hot. Sydney, on the other hand, wow. 66, 66, 66. Now that is a very pleasant temperature. And it is like, what season is it? It is like, it was just summer. So, isn't it like late fall? It's approaching winter, isn't it? So those are some pretty hot temperatures, considering. Pretty beautiful temperatures.
Whereas if you're in Tasmania, I remember I was there for a heat wave and it barely hit 90 degrees for my
Now Tasmania, I could imagine that being much cooler. In fact, now I'm curious. We got Sydney, we got Darwin. What about Tas? I always forget Tasmania's capital. What is it? Hobart? Yeah, 50, 54, and it's getting down to 41. That's pretty chilly. And I bet during the winter it gets pretty cold in Tas.
my Americans. So there's a huge difference, and the climates vary so much over here. You do get all 4 seasons over here depending on where you live. Or if you live in Melbourne, you get all 4 seasons in one day. But just like in the States, there are places where the climates vary, and you're going to find that all across the country. It's not always going to be hot and sunny and perfect beach weather here. Now, this one's going to be a little controversial and just a tiny bit political, you guys. But number 8 is that Australia is considered a nanny state. So, with COVID and the lockdowns and whatnot, a lot of Americans saw Australia as
What does that mean? Like a state that I've never heard that term, a nanny state. I've never thought of that of Australia. A nanny state. Is that like something like the government? You rely on the government a lot or something?
at its absolute worst, which is when people were locked down in their homes, they couldn't go more than 5Ks away. They couldn't visit relatives or friends or family outside of that 5K radius.
Wow.
And another one that I hear all the time is, oh, Australia took away the guns. Guns are banned in Australia, so it's such a nanny state over there. To be honest, there's more freedom over here in Australia than there is in the States.
Damn. That's a coming down with the hammer statement right there. More freedom in Australia. I'm interested to hear.
Having the right to bear arms doesn't necessarily make you more free. Just because there were stricter rules enforced during COVID doesn't necessarily mean that you're more
I mean, it's a weird concept, isn't it? More free. More free to what? You're definitely more free to carry a gun. That is a freedom. Now, you're less free in terms of like being free to not die to a maniac. So yeah.
free in general either. That doesn't mean that you live in a nanny state. Let's be fair, America's a pretty nanny state as well, if you're going to start comparing it that way.
I would say America, this is an interesting discussion. I feel like I never thought that of Australia, but over here in America, it definitely varies state by state. Hugely.
Like, America's actually one of the most invasive countries when it comes to freedoms and rights, even abroad.
I thought they meant invasive, like foreign policy. That's obviously true. Okay.
As an American abroad, I have to pay taxes and I have to declare to every single bank that I ever go to outside of the US that I'm an American citizen. Not just for regular generic record keeping purposes, but because
She has to, maybe that's a stupid question, but she has to pay taxes to America even though she lives in Australia? And she has to pay taxes in Australia as well? Really? What? Is that true? Did I misunderstand?
America actually goes to all of these banks and requests records for any American that is abroad. So if you're not American,
America definitely has like a huge surveillance state.
and you've opened a bank account recently and wondered why you had to check a box maybe that said you're not American, that's why America actually has its hands in all of these corporate banks around the world. Thank you, FATCA. So no, I've lived in Australia for a year now, and Australia is more free than it is in the States. I definitely wouldn't call it a nanny state, and when you look at the state of a lot of other countries in the world, it's kind of ridiculous to consider Australia.
I mean, it's kind of bizarre just because I feel like America and Australia are extremely similar in terms of being, a representative democracy. Both relatively free in a lot of respects, and in similar respects, governments will be governments and are corrupt and invasive and will surveil you. I feel like it's not super different. I think the gun thing is the biggest difference.
Australia and nanny state. Moving on to something a little bit more lighthearted, and that is that you will see kangaroos and koalas everywhere in Australia. I've been here for a year.
This is bad news if that's not true.
And I haven't seen a single koala, which is actually
Okay, but you've seen a kangaroo.
kind of sad and upsetting because I do really want to see a koala in the wild at some point. I don't really know where to go to see those though.
A koala, yeah, I don't know how you would find a koala. I guess you'd have to look up in the tree. In every tree. But a kangaroo I expect to see once in a while, like a deer.
Maybe we're just visiting the wrong places or we're at the wrong times, but yeah, I haven't seen a koala at all in the year that I've been here, and we've traveled to quite a few places around New South Wales and Canberra. But as far as kangaroos go, you're mostly going to see them as roadkill, to be honest. You're going to find a lot
Are you serious? That's the most depressing thing I've heard ever in any of these videos. Most of the kangaroos I see in Australia would be dead on the road. I never even really considered that. That's pretty messed up. I'm trying to think if that's true with deer over here in America. I'd say I see more living deer than dead deer, but it's probably like almost 50-50.
As far as kangaroos go, you're mostly going to see them as roadkill, to be honest. You're going to find a lot of kangaroo that
You can't just tell me that. You're going to make me cry.
are dead along the side of the road. That's probably going to be the first kangaroo you experience over here in Australia, which is
That's messed up.
a bit of a bummer. It's a bit of a letdown to see that, but it's the truth. Kangaroo are kind of similar to deer over in the States. They're kind of pests, and chances are the first time you see them, it'll probably be roadkill. And there
I
are
don't know if you can call something that boxes a pest. I don't know. I feel like it's not an appropriate word. Like it undermines what these things are. These things are like strange creatures. I understand they are pests sometimes, but they're miraculously strange creatures that can box. I guess some humans are pests, and they can box too. So, fair enough.
aren't a ton of kangaroos everywhere. I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen kangaroo and still have fingers left over. Yeah, don't come over to Australia expecting to see
I guess it's only been 1 year, so that's pretty good.
kangaroos and koalas everywhere outside of the cities. It's a lot tougher to find them than you think. And the last one, let's just get this one out there because it made me laugh that somebody had actually asked me this when I moved over here. Toilets in Australia.
That accent she just had definitely sounds like New York, more so than Pennsylvania.
It made me laugh that somebody
Made me laugh.
had actually asked me this when I moved
Ask me this.
over here. Toilets in Australia do not flush backwards.
What? No, I'm pretty sure that the Veritasium dude proved that they do. Actually, okay, it depends on the ways that the things point. But if they both point just into the bowl, it would flush the other way. From what I understand. I don't know, could be wrong.
I can't believe that's something that people are still asking, even though it's been years and years since The Simpsons came out with that episode about Australia. But no,
Is
the
that what it's from, The Simpsons?
toilets in Australia do not flush backwards. In fact, it entirely depends on the mechanisms that are within your toilet, so they can flush either way. In the States, they can flush either way here. That is definitely something that The Simpsons made up and is not true. So that's it for this video, you guys. 10 lies that
Take it up with Veritasium. Do you guys know that guy? He's like a legendary science YouTuber.
Americans have been told about Australia. Were you expecting these? Were there any that surprised you?
That was a really fun list. I enjoyed that. Wow, 30 minutes long. That was a really great video. Go check out her channel, Kinda Australian. Criminally undersubscribed to. She has a lot of good videos. I'll see you guys tomorrow, I think.